50 years on, we're looking back at the impact of the Berlin Wall on the lives of people there. Before the break, we heard Inga Eulitz's story of her dramatic escape from East Berlin in 1962. Another part of the Berlin Wall story is what went on underground. East Berliners also escaped to the west through the sewer systems and special tunnels dug underneath the wall, often aided and abetted by people from the west. Berliner Unterwelten is an association researching places of historical value in Berlin's underworld. Earlier this month in Berlin, historian Robin Williams met our reporter Kevin Brew on a street dividing East and West Berlin and told him the story of a botched underground escape in 1964 when a team of West Berlin rescuers were discovered by the Stasi. We take up the story as their tunnel digging yields a surprise.
Just as they were about to hit their target, the cellar of the street Strelitzer Straße 55, they end up hitting a patch of soft dirt, which ends up being a bit confusing because why is the dirt soft? Are we going to reveal our position if the dirt then sinks above us? And so they sent someone over to have a look, once again a courier, someone with a West German passport, and they came back saying, yes, we figured out why there's soft dirt. You've actually hit the ground underneath an outdoor toilet. Luckily, it hadn't been in use for a while, but it ends up actually being ideal because they can just go directly up through the toilet, then they're in the courtyard of the building, and they don't even have to go into the cellar. And so they can close the door, of course, of the toilet. So ideal. They end up having 4 West Berliners in the courtyard, and so people show up. They have to say a code word, and then usually 2 or 3 people at a time will use the tunnel, and they crawl to the west. Very successful. The first night, 28 people made it out. They tried a second night, even more successful, 29 people made it out. And then the 4 West Berliners were waiting as 2 more people came in, and they said, what's the code word? But these 2 people say, we don't know. But there's actually 3 of us. We weren't really sure where to go. And so the other guy's looking somewhere else. We'll go get him and we'll come back, and he'll know the password. And so these 2 men, they leave the courtyard, at which point the West Berliners are worried. They're confused. Is this a trap? Or is this real? And so one of them says, I'll go have a look. And he goes outside. Those 2 men were actually informants for the Stasi. So they run up the street to a group of border guards, the East German Border Patrol, in this case under the command of Sergeant Egon Schultz, and those border guards then make their way back to the building. Moments later, the West Berliner who had gone to have a look is running back into the building yelling, "Run!" And he quickly makes way directly for the toilet. He opens the door, he jumps in such a hurry, though, that he gets stuck. The second guy tries to jump in behind him, gets them even more stuck. Third guy tries to get in and is basically not even barely able to get into the tunnel at all. They're so stuck. And then the 4th man, Christian Sobel, who is one of the West Berliners who is actually carrying a pistol, just in case, watches as the first border guard comes into the courtyard. He then takes out his pistol and he just starts to fire and then jumps at the entrance to the tunnel with such force that he forces the other 3 loose. They all go tumbling down into the tunnel, and then they were able to crawl through to the other side, and that was the end of the night. The next morning, the newspapers come out in East Germany, and the front page on almost every single paper is Sergeant Egon Schultz, hero of the GDR, has been murdered protecting the border, murdered by Western agents, CIA, human traffickers, people who were apparently charging the East Germans 3,000 marks a head to use the tunnel. Of course, all lies. But the most important charge was murder. According to Christian Sobel, this was actually a true charge. He had shot the man, and he hadn't even been shot at himself. He was actually put on trial in West Berlin for the murder of this border guard, and he pleaded guilty. But he actually, in the end, was not convicted because, for whatever reason, the East Germans didn't release the autopsy records. So he wasn't convicted, but he went through the rest of his life thinking he was a murderer, and this was really hard for him because, of course, he'd gone into this to be a humanitarian, not to kill some innocent man who's been forced into the military. They made Egon Schultz a hero in East Germany. The street that I just mentioned, Strelitzer Straße, became Egon Schultz Straße, as were 160-odd other places renamed after this man. And, well, finally the truth comes out then as after the Stasi headquarters were occupied in 1990, shortly after the fall of the wall, they were able to discover secret files. And, well, one of these files was the file on the Egon Schultz case. It had actually been a cover-up. What had actually happened was that Sergeant Egon Schultz had run in, he'd been shot in the shoulder by Christian Sobel, the West Berliner, fallen to the ground. By that point, Christian Sobel was safely in the tunnel. As he began to get up again, his comrade came in behind and then pulled out his AK-47 Kalashnikov and just began to spray bullets into the courtyard. And so as Egon Schultz got up, he was basically cut in two from behind and so killed by friendly fire. But of course that was never admitted. But on the door of the building number 55, there still is a plaque, and it still says that Egon Schultz was killed. It just corrects the details of the story.
Historian Robin Williams there from Berliner Unterwelten, who also run guided tours for visitors, and their contact details are available on our website. I'm joined here in studio by Irish Times Deputy Editor Dennis Staunton, who lived in Berlin for many years, Professor Jürgen Barkhoff from the Department of Germanic Studies in Trinity College Dublin, and Rachel West joins us from our Berlin studio. You're all very welcome to the programme. Rachel, can I begin with you? We heard the story there of the tunnel, which is now literally in your backyard. Is there any evidence of its existence?
Well, you can't actually see the tunnel itself in our backyard, but the whole area just beyond our house, I live in number 53, is part of the War Memorial, and they've just developed the area, and it is actually, it's one of my first stops that I'd recommend people to do when they come to Berlin, because there's now marks on the ground for each tunnel, which direction it took, and there's little plaques to the amount of people that escaped in each direction. And I think that particular part around Strelitzer Straße and Bernauer Straße was particularly successful because it's a hill and the ground was very secure. And I think unlike the rest of Berlin, which is kind of very sandy, the earth was very firm.
Yeah.
So I think that's why the tunnels there were so successful. And it's literally the ground and the waste ground that was the military strip on which my house now stands. There's just little splayed marks all the way along it. There's about 5 or 6 tunnels basically radiating from Strelitzer Straße.
Presumably they succeeded in blocking an awful lot of tunnels off.
They did. I think they spent a huge amount of energy once the tunnel once there was sort of that mass exodus. They decided that the huge amount of energy was spent blocking tunnels and soldiers climbing down them with mirrors and detectors. And actually the one in Strelitzer Straße, they built a tunnel sort of at right angles to meet it, and they inserted bugs and everything to listen underground for any further tunnelling that went on. But I think after these initial successes, the tunnelling kind of stopped and people went for more diverse ways of escaping, especially as the military strip became more and more enhanced as time went on.